The Pittsburgh Steelers got the biggest news they could possibly get maybe all season long. This was the Christmas miracle that they needed. The Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday suffered a massive injury. TJ Watt goes down in the fourth quarter against the Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody's talking. I mean, initials were, oh, this is an Achilles. It's a foot injury. All the Twitter doctors are going crazy saying this is a Liz Frank sprain and this and that and this. Afterwards, TJ Watt says, low ankle sprain. X-rays were negative. I'm feeling okay. Monday morning rolls around. Mike Tomlin saying, I just saw TJ Watt. He's feeling pretty good. I'm pretty optimistic that he'll play against the Ravens. We're sitting here on Bleacher Report's live stream at 5 p.m. talking, that's nonsense. He's lying to us 100%. There's no chance TJ Watt is just suddenly okay after limping off the field into the locker room against the Eagles less than 12 hours ago. All right, well, here we are. TJ Watt was limited in practice, and does not have an injury designation, no injury tag, heading into Week 16 against the Baltimore Ravens. The Pittsburgh Steelers do have many injuries, and we will dive into all of them because they are all very significant, including George Pickens, Deshaun Elliott, Larry Ogunjobi, and Dante Jackson, including Justin Fields. But they get TJ Watt back, which is the biggest news anybody could ask for at this time of the year with the AFC North title on the line and what TJ Watt means to the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially in the regular season, especially this close to the playoffs. Well, he avoids it all, and he will return against the Baltimore Ravens. Nick, your thoughts when you saw no injury tag, TJ, who, I mean, an hour and a half before the injury goes out, the injury report goes out, I'm talking to him. Everybody else is talking to him. And he's saying, I don't know, we'll test it on Saturday and we'll see what happens, which is, I mean, driving there as I'm pulling up to the stadium because I did not go to watch practice and been sick as a dog. I'm not trying to get everybody else sick for Christmas. That's just I'm not into that game. So I show up just before everybody goes into the locker room. I'm driving the whole way there going, I bet you TJ pulls out like some classic Mike Tomlin comment, some classic, I'm going to leave this one hanging on a hinge here just so that everybody gets a cliffhanger going into Saturday so that the Ravens don't know what to do in preparation. Well, that's what he tried to do. And then the Steelers just slammed the door on that and said, nah, TJ's playing, pal. We know it. Your thoughts when you saw TJ Watt, no injury tag going into Week 16?
I mean, the list of injuries is extensive for the Steelers, and they're all in pretty important areas to important players. But if you could only choose one to come back, you're choosing TJ Watt. I mean,
easy.
How many times have we talked about the record of the Steelers without Watt on the field? It's 1-11 if you haven't heard it before. It's not good for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you could choose one, it had to be Watt. When this week started, I remember I either told you off air or I said it on air. I'd have to go back and check if I said it on air, but it was the comment that Mike Tomlin made at the end of his press conference. Because in the beginning of his press conference, he gave what he gave, and it was simple Tomlin, but he was asked about Herbig and Preston Smith. He didn't have to say anything about TJ Watt. He did, and I was like, that's weird, but still doesn't practice on Tuesday, limited on Wednesday. The videos look like he's walking a little gingerly, but hey, lo and behold, no injury tag. So that is a huge, huge advantage for the Pittsburgh Steelers that, to be completely honest, for most of the week, I had kind of closed off in my head. So I'm excited to see that he's back on the field, and I'm hoping this just means that last week was simply just, hey, I rolled my ankle and I'm taking it easy this week, because if it has lasting effects, it's not what you want to see. But hey, the sign is he's going on Saturday, and that's always better than the opposite.
No, I agree. And I think if there is some sort of line where the Pittsburgh Steelers could say, well, there is the chance that he injures this further, I don't know if they would have pushed it. I think that TJ would have had to really secure himself and say, I'm ready to go. Like, this is going to be totally fine, because afterwards things get difficult. I understand that. And I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers shutting down TJ after this week and just saying, look, we won. We beat the Ravens. We did what we needed to do. We're going to head into, especially if Kansas City beats Houston and the Steelers look like they really locked up the third seed. Great. We're going to head into the postseason. We're going to keep everybody healthy if that's the case. But I also was somewhat convinced at least by yesterday when TJ was a limited participant that Mike Tomlin's words about the Baltimore Ravens being a divisional showdown and how important that matchup is, I took that as truth, as in the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to play around with this AFC North title, that they aren't going to say, well, we could win it if we win out after a loss. No, they understand what not having George Pickens out there means. They understand what not having guys like Larry O and Dante Jackson and Deshaun Elliott out there means. They're not going to risk it with TJ Watt. They're going to go out there. They're going to try to beat Lamar Jackson the way they've been beating Lamar Jackson. And they're going to try to shore this thing up before they have to do anything else and control their own destiny moving forward. And I mean, I don't disagree with it as long as the risk of injury is very, very low heading into this game. Now, on the other side of that, no George Pickens. Deshaun Elliott is doubtful. He barely practiced, if practiced at all this week. Dante Jackson is questionable after returning to practice today in a limited participation. And Larry Ogunjobi is also questionable after being limited throughout the week. I don't expect Deshaun Elliott to play. I have almost no expectation for him to play, actually. Larry O, I could see playing on Saturday. I think that the fact that he was limited throughout the week gives some hope for him to play against the Ravens. And Dante Jackson, I also feel has some hope. He's just the guy that, and I hate to label somebody like this, but he's the guy that just keeps getting hurt and keeps coming back. And that stinks, but at the same time, availability is the best ability. And Dante Jackson's always available for the start of games. And if that's all you're going to get from him right now, I think that's okay. Do you expect anything different? I don't expect Deshaun to play, but I might expect the other two to play.
Yeah, I think I would not count on Deshaun Elliott being out there, especially for what you mentioned. I mean, this is an important game, don't get me wrong, but you need Deshaun Elliott, and I talked about it yesterday with Jacob. You need Deshaun Elliott a lot more than people like to think, because he sets that tone for the defensive backfield. You can't lose Deshaun Elliott going into the playoffs, because you're going to need that physical run stuffer, that guy that in the open field is 90% accurate when it comes to making the tackles. I mean, we saw what the secondary was without him last week, and it was a secondary that was asked a lot of questions about when it comes to tackling, and you need him as the playoffs set to begin. So I would imagine that he's not going to go, especially because he didn't do anything until today? Or yesterday, I believe he was out there a little bit as well. But I think that it's probably likely that he's not going to go.
Yeah, I agree. I do not expect him to go. And then George Pickens and Justin Fields round this injury report out. And I'll say this. George was expected. That's a massive loss. Massive loss. Justin Fields is a huge loss for the Steelers right now because they need somebody. They need some spark on offense, and they got to find it somewhere. And to be honest with you, Justin Fields is a spark. He's an instant spark. He allows you to do other things. And I think at this point, you just got to try to utilize everybody. Whoever could give you that something, that extra step, that speed, who cares? As long as they could get you first downs, Justin Fields could get you first downs. You got to use them. Not having Justin Fields is big. And there are a couple of questions in here that we're going to get to. I don't mean to address them early, but I'm probably going to. I don't think Justin Fields is in a spot where this is a little injury. I think it might be a very concerning injury, one that could shut him down for a while. I mean, abdominal injuries are never easy. That could be a billion things, including a hernia. Like that's something that the Pittsburgh Steelers could be looking at this and saying, yeah, we're going to work through Justin over the next, week or so. But if nothing improves, he might end up on IR. That's how I look at Justin. Like, unless we see some improvement soon, you have to imagine that that's a pretty serious injury. And this close to the postseason, obviously not something you want to deal with or have on your roster or get hit with at the position, but something that the Steelers might have to open up a roster spot for, just because they're going to need somebody else. They're going to have to try to find another playmaker somewhere, and Justin might be shut down. I'm a little nervous about the Justin Fields injury and what it means for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not just now, which I think this is huge. I think you could have really used him without George Pickens out there. But at the same time, I think this could be serious enough to land him out for the rest of the season. With George, are you confident about next week, knowing he did at least some work this week?
Yeah, that's what it feels like they were kind of prepping him for, because it didn't feel like they were trying to get him ready for Saturday. It felt like they were slowly getting him ramped up for next week. With it being a 4-day week, it's not like they have a lot of practice time next week. So it felt like they were using this week as kind of the beginning of his Chiefs prep as the rest of the team was getting ready for the Baltimore Ravens. So again, I think this weekend's result may change that. I think if the Steelers win and they have locked up the AFC North, they might be a little bit more cautious when it comes to George Pickens, especially if Kansas City wins and locks up the 1 seed and Buffalo wins and makes it even more hard or more difficult for the Steelers to lock up the 2 seed. If all those things happen, I think that they might be playing it safe with George. But if they lose or they have actual reason to play and try to win these games for seeding, I think you see George Pickens back by the Kansas City game.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty strong possibility. Now, again, just like you said, this weekend could change a lot of things. I think a win, just like you said, maybe dampens his potential to return, but a loss definitely pushes that eagerness, that sense of urgency to the max to get him back on the field, especially if the offense struggles, because at that point you need something. You got to find some help for Russell Wilson and company. George is your only option. Let's not act like there's nobody else. There's nobody else. We've given up on the Mike Williams thing. It's got to be George Pickens. I agree with you. I do think that there's a sense that George could come back against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Steelers need him to be back against the Kansas City Chiefs if they lose this one. They can't waste any more time without George Pickens. I mean, I think we could all agree on that one where we stand here. This is not a guy. This is not a situation where, I get it, crucial injury, concerning for the postseason. You're running out of time here to win the AFC North. You're running out of opportunities. And the road, as Mike Tomlin says, is getting narrow. It's also getting extremely difficult. And let's not act like Cincinnati's a walkthrough. This is a pretty brutal game against an AFC North opponent who's going to want to spoil your season and is not going to make it easy for you to walk into the postseason as the division championship. If they have anything to say about it, you're going to lose it. So I do think that it kind of pushes that sense of urgency if they lose. Now, again, if they win, there's no need. You know, the Steelers aren't hunting for the 1 seed at this point. I mean, maybe they are, but if the Chiefs beat the Texans, I think it does more for them to just say, okay, cool, let's coast into the 3rd, then let's push it to the max and try to get the 2. I mean, no, you've just as big of a likelihood that you don't have to go to Buffalo as you do have to go to Buffalo if you're the 2 seed. It doesn't make a difference at that point. You'll try for the best, but chances are the road to the Super Bowl isn't going to go through Acrisure Stadium. And because of that, you'll take what you could get, which right now is an AFC North crown. That's what they're looking at.